Writing formulas in Notion can look kind of hard if you don't know any sort of coding language, but Notion's language inside formula boxes aren't actually code. I personally don't know how to code, but I understand how Notion formulas work. In this video, what I'm going to do is go through all of the basic functions in Notion that will apply to the majority of use cases that most users have. So when we dive into Notion, to use any sort of formula, you need to have a database. So you see, I have a table, a database in here, and you can do that by going / typing out table, and then there is your inline database. Now, the formulas inside of Notion are in a property. So you come into your property type. At the moment it's a multi-select. I'm going to go down to advanced, and there is the formula property. Now, unlike spreadsheets in Google Sheets or Excel, formulas work on a row basis rather than a box basis. So if, for example, I add in another property and just put a normal number property, in Google Sheets or Excel, you'd be able to reference the cell. In Notion, because this is a database that goes down, it's only referencing this specific row. So we have constant variables and dynamic variables. Essentially, that means the number either goes all the way down to all of the rows, or it picks out something that's in that row. So if we go 1, add 1, we've got some basic math in there, and both of these are constants. So they are going to go all the way down the page. So you can see that's 2, 2, 2. If we add some numbers into this property, so we've got 1, 2, and 3, these are dynamic in this formula. And the reason they are dynamic is because we can come back to the formula. These are the properties we have in the page. So this is the name property, which is here. And then we have the number property. I'm going to push number. And now this is referencing this specific row of that property. So we've got this number. So it's 1 added to the constant, which is 1. 2 added to the constant, which is 1, which is 3. So we've got 1 add 2 makes 3. And then 3 add 1 makes 4. And then if we change what's in this property, it's also going to change the formula. And that's the difference between a dynamic and a constant variable inside the formula box. Now that's addition. And then to do subtract, you use the minus sign. So we've now got 1 minus this number, 1 minus that number, etc., etc. And then you've got multiply, which is times, and then we have divide, just like that. They are the symbols you can use. You can also use the functions that are in Notion. So if we scroll down a little bit, you can see add, and instead of looking at using the add symbol, you can go add bracket the number, comma, the number equals. So if we were to use that in this example, we will get rid of all of this. We can go add open bracket, 1 was our number. We're going to use a comma to separate the two arguments. They're the two things we're using. And then number. So prop stands for property. And then what's inside these speech marks is the name of the property. And this is case sensitive. So if you have a lowercase n, it will actually show an error down the bottom and it will say property not found. So if I change that back to a capital N, it's now found and I can enter that formula. And it's given the exact same answer. So it's done 1 add 1 makes 2, it's done 1 add 2 makes 3, except it looks slightly different in the formula box, which is why when you're looking at other formulas, they may look different, but still give the same result. So we've done the addition, which is there. We've got subtract, multiply, and divide, which are all of those values that we've already gone through. Then we have text formatting. So that is numbers. Numbers are on the right side of the cell. If it's text, it will be on the left side of the cell. So if I now add in a text property and type a number into a text property, so I'm going to type 1, 2, 3, you can see the text is now on the left side of the cell. The numbers are on the right side of the cell. I can change this. So this is a number. This is 2. It's being read as a number format. If I use format, I can then change all of these to text. So even though it's doing a mathematical calculation, 1 add 1, Notion is reading it as text, so it's on the left side of the box. And they are some fundamentals that you'll see inside of Notion. It's either text, number, date, or a Boolean. Date and Boolean we will go through in a minute, but the text and number, you'll see they go on different sides of the cell. When we are looking to combine different pieces of information in text format, so if we then add in another text property and then put in a word, so I'm going to put my name, then my last name. So if I want to put 1 and then Danny next to one another, I can do that inside the formula box. So we're going to use, both of these are going to be dynamic because I'm going to reference the property. So I'm going to go text, add, column. So now I'm picking the text property, the column property, and putting those together. And you can see now we've got 1, my name, 2, my name, and then 3 is empty because this one is empty. And the same principle applies with adding in spaces. So if we wanted to add a space, this is going to be a constant variable inside the formula. We're going to do that. So what we've done is inside here, we've got the text property and it's asking for the property. Here, what we're doing is saying, just add a space in between these two things. So we're text formatting, we're bringing two properties together, two dynamic properties together, and adding a space in the middle purely for viewing aesthetic purposes. So now you can see 1 space and then my name. And just like every other formula, there is a constant, there is an operator format. So if we scroll down a little bit, you can see we've got the hashes, and these are represented for numbers. We've got these tick boxes, which are Boolean, and then we have these words. So this is text. So we know that this is deliberately working with text formats. So we've got the concat, and that is what we're doing. You can see down here, we've got dog plus go equals doggo. That's their example. And concat, dog, and go. So we can do the exact same thing that we've just done here, but instead of using the plus, we're going to use concat. So concat, open bracket, and then we're going to go text, comma, to separate them. And then we want that space in the middle, and then we want that last one as the column. And this is going to give us the exact same output, even though the formulas look slightly differently. So now that we've gone through the number formatting and text formatting, I'm now going to go through some date manipulation. And to do that, we're going to grab a date property. So I'm going to change this to a date. And inside a date property, you can actually change the formatting of a date inside the property itself. So you can see we've got year, year, month, day, day, month, year, etc., etc. Relative is relative to today, to now, to write what's going on. So that is today's date. Then if we go to there, it's going to show it's Thursday, then it's tomorrow, etc., etc. So that's how you could format the date inside of the actual date property, but it's still being read as a date when it comes to formulas. So if we now come into here, so when we put that date property in here, it's going to output the same thing, but we can now change what this looks like using a date format. So again, if you can't remember what they're called, you can scroll down into the operators and have a look and see what operators or functions work with the date. So if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see we've got these date icons, and these mean they work with dates. So they won't necessarily work with text or number inputs, but they'll work with date inputs. So we can carry on scrolling. Now this is text. And the reason this is text is because it's giving text. So that's the output, but we can use a date inside of it to make it text. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this format date. So I'm going to put a date inside of it. So if we come inside here, we've got format date. The now is the date part of this section, but we're not going to use now. We're going to use that date property we have in the database. So there it is. So I'm going to use that as the date. Then if we go back to the syntax, we want text. So you can put an M for months, days for a D, Y for years, H for hours, and M for minutes. And you can put as many things as you want. So I'm just going to put a comma, and then I'm going to open up with speech marks, put an M, speech marks, and then bracket to close. And what that's done is that's just looking at the month of the date. So it's currently January, which is why it says 1. If I then put another M, you've got 0, 1, January, etc. And you can just experiment with how you want this all to look. You can then put symbols in the middle and adjust as you see fit. You can use any of those to format the date. The one thing I will say is because it's outputting as a text, you then cannot use this formula inside a calendar because Notion is reading it as a text, which is why those lines were there as the formula. But it's reading a date and turning it into text. So that won't work. This won't work in a calendar for calendar by. When we're looking at date calculations, it works exactly the same way. So we're going to add another date property. So let's call this date2, really original. And we're going to add in another date. Let's put the 26th. And then I'm going to copy that and paste that down a couple of cells so we can do a couple of different calculations, and then we're going to add in that one right there. So we're going to get rid of what's in here, and again, if you forget what they're called, just scroll down, try and find what the function is. Most of the dates are down the bottom, so date add and date subtract work exactly the same, except one of them is adding the date and the other one is subtracting the date. So we're going to go with the date add for this example, and if we go into date add, you can see date, number, text. So the date is going to be the property we're using, which is either going to be the first date or the second date. Then we have our number, which can be either a constant, so we can choose the number and it will apply to everything, or it can be dynamic, so we could reference another property. And then we have the text. So we've got our date add. We're going to use the date property, comma, for the next argument. And remember, the number was the next one. We're going to use the number of the property. So we now have a dynamic number inside this function. And then we want a word. And what you can do with the date add is you can pick how many it is. So at the moment, we're picking this date. We're adding this. So for the top example, it will be 1. And it can be 1 year, 1 quarter, 1 month, etc., etc., etc. So we are going to type in years and close that off. And now it's going to add 1 year to that date. So you can see it's now the 22nd. That's what? 2020, 2022. Wow, third time lucky. 2021. And it's adding it from today. So if we change this to 3, it's now going to add 3 years. And then if we change this one back to, let's say it was 2018, it's now adding 3 years. Oh, that was the wrong year, wasn't it? 2018. Now you can see the 12th of January 2018, you add 3 years, that is today. So that is how you can add a date, and to subtract, all you'd need to do is change this to subtract, just like that, and then we have the date being subtracted. When it comes to Boolean logic, this essentially gives you a tick box. It's either true or it's false, and the way Notion displays this is just like a checkbox. So the easiest thing to put as a Boolean is just to put something in and ask if it is equal to whatever that happens to be. So does 1 equal 1. And the reason I've put those in speech marks is if it was the red one, then it's read as a number, not a text. So this is a text property, and now this is reading the 1 as text rather than a number. So does text have 1? Yes. It's a tick box. If it doesn't, no, it won't be ticked. That is the easiest way to look at Boolean logic. When you then move further on, you can then say, okay, if that is true, I want you to do this thing. If it's not true, I want you to do this thing. And what we can do is we can put a question mark. So this first Boolean check is a question. That's what your question is. Does this equal this? If it is, then you put your first answer. If it's not, you put your second answer. So instead of having a tick box, you can now choose what the answers are. You can put emojis in there, you can put words in there, you can do what you want in those answers. So we have a yes and we have a no. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to duplicate this property. So we have the exact same thing. We've duplicated the formula, but now we're going to ask another question. So we're going to ask a different question. So let's ask, does the number, so we're going to ask the number property, is that one bigger than 1? So if the number is bigger than 1, it's going to be ticked. So let's turn this one to 0, and now it's not bigger than 1, so that one's not true. So now we have two different questions. These are two different questions of Boolean logic. And to combine these together, what we can do is we can put them together. So I'm going to duplicate this just so we have another property to work with. So we have, this is the first question. I'm going to put a question mark and say yes, colon, no. So we now have two different answers to our question. But we want this question to be part of that question. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it into this section. So we've got yes as an answer. I'm going to paste that in. Now I'm going to put a bracket around this question because it is slightly different. Let's put that in there. So now we've got two different questions. The first question, is the number bigger than 1? If it is, then I want you to ask this next question. If it isn't, it's going to completely skip this section and go to no. So it doesn't matter what you've got in there. If this isn't true, it's going to skip that question and go to the second answer. If it is true, then it's going to ask this question. So if the number is bigger than 1 and the text is equal to 1, then it's going to put yes. If it's not, then no. So we can have a look at our answers. We've got a yes and a yes, which makes yes. We've got a no, which makes no, and a no and a no, which makes no. If we were to then change one of these, so we've currently got this as a yes. If we were to then change one of these, so if this equals 1, now that first question is true. So both of these, the first question is true. This one, the first question, is false. So if we have another look, this question, if it's true, yes, it's true. Is this bit true? Yes, it is. Then the answer should be yes, which it is. This one, yes, it's true. This bit's true. So we're going to do this question. Is this bit true? No, it's not. So the answer is going to be no. And then is the first question true? No. So we're going to skip this bit and go straight to no, which is yes, no, no. You can combine all of these different things into one formula property to make one large formula with lots of different questions with calculations, text formatting, date formatting, all in there, as long as the output, that one result, is the same across the board. I have a few other videos on my channel going through different Notion formulas, some of them very long, some of them very simple. So feel free to have a browse around, and I'll see you in another video.